All right, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Teardown. My name is Jeff Gluck. I'm along with my coworker Jordan Bianchi. We are motorsports writers for The Athletic, and we are here into the off season, week one of the off season, and we are here to talk about the season in review, the season that was for the NASCAR Cup Series. Excuse my voice a little bit. Came home to a pair of sick children who have gotten my voice a little bit froggy. And I'm trying to clear that out before Jordan, I see you in Vegas next week, where we'll probably have more froggy voices from a crazy F1 schedule coming up.
So you got sick. You come home from a grind. You work hard, put in a lot of hours, come home, and then your two little children get you sick.
That's how it goes. If I was either going to get sick at the racetrack from all the late season travel, or
I didn't get sick.
Well, you have an incredible immune system.
Yes, I do.
You really do. I don't know how you avoid getting sick so often, but
I don't hang around small children.
Well, that is definitely a thing. So we haven't done this style podcast before, so this could be a disaster, Jordan. I don't know. We're going to try to go through every race in order, and just, because the reason we thought about doing this is we were talking about some of the early season races, and we're like, oh yeah, do you remember when this happened? Oh, I forgot about this. Oh my gosh. Like it's like the season flies by quickly, but there's also like a ton of stuff that goes on. And a lot of little quirky fun stuff that I think it's worth revisiting. So look, we have to say straight up, we're not going to remember everything. Like you have an incredible memory, and so you have a great recall for things, but as we've talked about on the podcast repeatedly, I do not. I'm going through your notes that you had made here for some of these races, and I'm like, I have no idea what I don't remember this at all. I had to go through some of my pictures on my camera roll to help me remember some stuff. So we'll go through it, and we'll talk longer about some races, not longer. I'm sure you guys will say after the podcast, I can't believe you guys didn't mention this.
I made these notes yesterday working on the show prep. And a lot, some of it I did off memory. Some of it I just went through each race and I looked at the box score and things were triggered, that kind of thing. Or, oh yeah, that happened, right? But when I got done with it, there's some races, and we'll talk about it, I'm sure. I'm like, didn't more happen? I feel like this is thin. Like, I feel like I'm missing something. So I'm sure there's something that's going to pop up. You made some notes on it as well. I saw your notes, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. So it's gonna be interesting. We'll see. It's gonna be fun to talk about, though. Like you said, the season feels very, very long at times. Like the Daytona 500 feels like it happened like 5 years ago. It also feels like it happened 2 months ago. It's this weird, feeling of longness, and then it goes by so quick, as you said. So I'm excited. Let's get to it. Lots to talk about.
All right. Well, let's start with the Clash, which was you got to go to the Clash for the first time this year. I was very excited about that, to have you out there, because I felt last year when I had gotten to go, and I was like, man, I wish Jordan could experience this and see this. Year two of the Clash, it was okay. But well, I guess what did you think of being there, and what do you remember about going for the first time, seeing the track, all that stuff?
I remember walking in and thinking, oh my goodness, this historic football stadium that's hosted all of these major events, they built a freaking racetrack in the middle of it, and it looked good. It doesn't look like it was thrown together. It looked like a real put together racetrack. And I was impressed, and it felt different. It didn't feel like a normal race. Maybe it's because of how the pits were set up and everything else. And so it was exciting. Now, obviously, you're going to lose something from year one to year two. And I get that. But for me, for being there for the first time, I was like, wow, this is really cool. I get this. I get why they're doing this. And I thought it went well. I mean, we're going to talk about the race a little bit and everything else, but up to the race, I was like, wow, this is cool. I can see why this is a winning concept and what they want to move this around to different parts of the country or different parts of the world, because this works.
Right. And then the race starts.
And then the race starts. And let's just leave it at that.
And, the drivers, I don't know if they lost their minds a little bit this time, or they had realized like the only way to get past people is to just nail people out of the way. It was interesting coming off a season where people had talked about rear impacts being such a big thing, and then they promptly got to the clash and were just nailing each other. But it was a messy race. It was not great racing. By the way, this race ended up coming in at 50.2% on the Was It a Good Race poll. I'm going to be, as we go through these here, I'll tell you what these races ranked. That was number 32 of 38 races this year. So people did not think this was a great race. And of course, Martin Truex Jr. ends up winning it, which was big and sort of an omen, I guess, symbolic of what was to come, because he had not won the previous season. And so this was sort of like, oh, wait, they can win again.
It was, and that was the question to him afterwards a little bit. To that line of thinking was, you hadn't won in a year. Do you think you felt like you had lost it a little bit, and that kind of thing? And he was, I wish I had the exact quote, and I should, but I don't. He was very, very adamant. Like, no, I'm still as good as ever. My team is really good, and I think he said, we're going to win a lot of races this year, something to that effect. Like, he kind of made it very clear in a very, Martin Truex Jr. isn't somebody who's going to make a lot of big comments, but he was very adamant. Like, we're going to win races this year, and we're going to be a factor. And he was right.
Yeah. And, they had a podium afterwards. Do you remember this? They had the Olympic style podium with medals.
I remember it. I don't remember seeing them on it because we went different places after the race.
Yeah. Well, he was joined by the two RCR drivers.
That's right.
And so we thought, well, what can we read into this? Maybe Truex is going to bounce back. He ends up winning the regular season championship.
Yeah.
Maybe Kyle Busch is going to have a big year for RCR. That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
And he did have a good start to the season. He ends up winning 3 races, of course, drops off. And then Austin Dillon was also on the podium with them, which now you're like, what? That certainly didn't foreshadow anything. But also there was the Wiz Khalifa concert at the halftime break.
Cypress Hill too.
Cypress Hill. That's right.
Yeah. That was awesome. Because that I remember. That is like one of the distinct memories. Is I stepped away at the halftime break. I had to go do something.
No, I think Cypress Hill they were pre-race, right?
No, they were
pre-race, and Wiz Khalifa was a halftime.
Yeah, whatever it was, maybe you're right. But I remember stepping. I remember stepping. I thought Wiz was. Anyway, for the Cypress Hill part of this, I remember stepping away because I had to do something, and I come back, and like they're in mid concert, and I was like, and everybody is like in the press box, like not everybody, but you specifically were like moving and like swaying, and like people were like, and there was a distinct odor emanating from the grandstands of the LA Coliseum. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. Like it just felt special. It felt like an event. It felt like unlike any other NASCAR race I've ever been to in my life, which is a good thing.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move on, because if we spend this long on every race, it's going to be a long podcast.
That's why I thought we were doing this. I'm like, okay, we're going to do 38 races. We're going to take 5 minutes on each. Okay, well, I'll just pack a lunch or breakfast.
All right. We're not going to spend this long on everyone, because I won't remember this many things.
No offense to Loudon. We're going to gloss over Loudon.
Yeah. So we go to Daytona, and lots of excitement there this time. Because number one, you have some interesting drivers. You have Travis Pastrana, who I remember on Media Day was absolutely spectacular. And you're like, man, I missed this dude. This is awesome. You're like, you had Connor Daly there. You're like, he's probably not going to make it. He
almost didn't.
The money team. He shouldn't. Yeah. You had a lot of fun stuff going on. There was this one thing I remember. They were kicking off NASCAR's 75th anniversary. So Diplo was supposed to, who ends up doing the end of the season concert for Phoenix as his country persona, but he does this industry party, and it was supposed to be at the Daytona airport. They ended up moving it to the Embry-Riddle Gymnasium at the last minute, and half the people there were like, I'm not really into this kind of music, and then like including you, I think.
I stayed for the Truck Series race.
Didn't you come late?
I came for like the last 5 minutes of the concert, and it was I have no idea who this person is. And I was like, cool, whatever. And I went for the last 5 minutes, and I saw a Jeff Gluck that you look like a little kid on Christmas morning. You were so excited and happy, and it was like you got the exact present you wanted underneath the Christmas tree, and it was like you were just giddy.
It was amazing. I don't know how many other people appreciated it, but I thought it was pretty cool. But that was the kind of tones, you're like, wow, this is and Pete Davidson was at the Daytona 500 walking around getting a tour from Ben Kennedy on.
I'm the one who spotted him, not you.
Did you walk by him and you're like, hey, is that Pete Davidson?
No, yeah, we were walking,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you were like, who's that with Ben? And they're like, yeah, I don't know who that is. And I'm like, listen, you know this, I'm not when it comes to pop culture, celebrity stuff. But I'm like, I think that's Pete Davidson actually. And they're
He had
like,
his hood up, he had sunglasses on.
Yeah, he was going through the inspection bay.
Yeah, that was so bizarre. Yeah. So you're like, wow, this is going to be, and Blippy, fake Blippy was there.
Oh yeah,
fake Blippy as well. So it was a lot of celebrities for me.
Yeah,
I was like, man, this is NASCAR 75th is going to be lit. But anyway,
nothing says excitement like fake Blippy.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a big deal for if you have kids. So the race, of course, I don't remember too many details about it typically for me, but I do remember that Kyle Busch was leading at regulation, which he's brought up several times this year. And that was an achievement for him. But I also think there was some late wrecks that sort of triggered a bunch of chaos, if I'm not mistaken. So
multiple overtimes.
Yeah, multiple overtimes. What do you remember about that?
Lots of crashes. I remember Kyle Busch, leading on lap 200, and because I remember as he said, he made comments about that kind of throughout the year. Like, I was leading on the last lap of the Daytona 500. I remember Joey Logano narrowly by the skin of the margins finishing second. If that caution comes out a half a second later, Joey Logano's probably celebrating in victory lane and not Ricky Stenhouse Jr. I remember being in victory lane with Ricky Stenhouse Jr. and just stacks of toilet paper were everywhere because that's one of their sponsors and they were throwing them. And it kind of set the tone for what that 47 team, the JTG Doherty team, did throughout the year. Because obviously they won Daytona and that put them in the playoffs, but their performance throughout the year was good enough to be playoff worthy, and they would have been in the conversation and had a good chance to make the playoffs even without that victory. So it was kind of a precursor of things to come.
Right. And, we at the time thought, wow, Stenhouse just stole a playoff spot.
Yeah.
And that wasn't the case ultimately because he ran well enough to make it most of the season.
Yeah.
Just on his own merit. Like, it wasn't like he finished 25th in points. I mean, they took a significant step up this year. They fell off around the playoff time, and then they had a really bad playoffs. But
but still, they did a great job.
Step forward, yeah. So that race, the Daytona 500, got a 71% on the Good Race poll and ranked 21st for the season. Then it was off to Fontana. Oh, this is getting sad. This is getting sad for me, where it felt like the whole weekend was like a big mourning thing for me. Like it was just this gray overcast. It bizarrely snowed, like not just snow a little bit, but like big chunky flakes on the first day we were there, which we had never seen before. The nearby mountains got beautifully snow covered, and obviously that you knew it was the end because I think didn't the sale news, like the price and everything had come out maybe right before that race, so you're like, all right, it's a couple
days leading into that week leading into the race, it had become known.
So everybody knew this was it, and there was no going back. So this was really the last one. They had it painted on the side of the tunnel. Thanks for the 5 wide ride, and it ends with a great race from what I can remember. I was sure leaving this one that it was going to be in the 90% club. It ends up at 89.9, ends up as the 4th best race of the year. Kyle Busch wins, which was a big statement at the time. Big statement, because it was like, wow, he just wins with RCR right off the bat. After he almost, yes, exactly. Yep. He could have won the first 3 races essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was like, wow, okay, because there was a lot of questions about how he was going to fit in over there, whether it was going to be a struggle, what it was going to be like if they got off to a slow start, was there going to be fighting and that kind of thing. And it was, to his credit, to RCR's credit, it was like hand in glove, no issues whatsoever. They got along very, very well. They had speed in a lot of the early season races. And this was, you feel like I use this term too much sometimes. It was a statement win in a lot of respects. And it was like, okay, he's going to be okay. He's a good fit over there. He's going to keep winning races. And that proved to be the case.
I don't remember what Atlanta was like for you guys the next week, but I'm pretty sure this might have been the coldest race of the year. I remember after we did our podcast.
Atlanta was cold.
Yeah.
Atlanta was really cold.
We ended up not having many races late in the year that were cold at all. They were all warm, even Martinsville. But
yeah,
this Fontana race was cold, but I went out after with a couple friends to do my quiet track stuff out there and just have a moment on the start finish line. I know you don't get emotional about this track, but it was definitely tough for me. We took some beers out there and we poured one out for Fontana on the start finish line. Oh my God, you're closing your eyes. Like, that's ridiculous. That's not ridiculous.
It's a racetrack. It's okay. It's not going anywhere. It's still going to be there, and it's just a different shape.
It is going somewhere. Have you seen the pictures of the demolition lately?
I've seen the photos, but it's still going to be a half mile, Jeff.
Well, you say that, but we don't really know that. Anyway,
I understand.
It is not just a racetrack. It's a place with emotion, with memories for a lot of people, and those memories are ceasing to exist except in your mind. So, oh my gosh, you are so unsentimental, so unemotional.
Taking a beer and pouring it out on the start finish line just seems, I don't know, to each their own. I get it. You've got a special connection to that place. Great.
Anyway, it was very sad. I felt very sad leaving there. I felt, I was just reflecting all the way at driving out of the tunnel, all that stuff. It was, I guess I don't want to go any further because you're just making fun of me at this
point.
I'm
not. I get
sad weekend. Sad weekend.
Oh, you can keep going. Keep talking. Cut open a vein, Jeff. I'll be your therapist.
No, the therapist is making fun of me, not listening to me. So
that's why I could be a therapist.
Yeah, no, you would be. Oh my God, you would be the world's worst therapist. Can you imagine? Oh my gosh, I've never thought of that before. That would be horrible. Absolutely horrible.
So you shouldn't laugh at people's problems when they bring them to you?
Oh my God. Somebody be like, yeah, I really don't know what to do about this situation. You'd be like, why do you care? What's the big deal?
Stop. Fuck up. Stop crying. Put your big boy pants on and let's move on.
Wow, it's amazing I can't believe you're not married. Why haven't you been able to find someone, Jordan? Anyway, wow. All right. Well,
speaking of marriage, let's go to Vegas.
Let's go to Vegas. So we go to Vegas, and it's, I guess, opening day there. I was going to say Friday, but was it that Friday?
It was Friday night when we got the news.
Yeah, I guess it was Friday because it was Xfinity practice. And
yeah, it was lit because I started getting the word. I think we both kind of started getting word about this. I know it was, I had just had dinner because I was home that weekend, and I had just had dinner and gotten back, and then my phone started going crazy with people and, what was going on. And Chase Elliott had injured himself snowboarding and was going to miss. I didn't know. Do we know immediately? I think we knew he was going to miss. We knew he was going to miss Las Vegas. I don't think we knew exactly how long.
I think right away people were saying 6 weeks. I think almost right away.
I think the speculation was it was
like
going to be a while.
4 to 6 weeks or something.
Yeah,
right?
But I don't know if Hendrick. I think Hendrick. I don't think that night. I think Hendrick maybe had Hendrick had a press conference the next day.
Yeah, but I'm saying I think people even with like the rumors early.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I couldn't. I'd have to go back.
I remember being in the garage talking to the Wilfongs, which are some long time. They used to be Carl's crew and all this stuff. They're part of their family. And I was talking to them, and like Bob ran past. And then he was kind of standing over by the 9 team. And I said to them, I was like, I probably need to go see what's going on. Because if Bob's running somewhere, usually just for no reason, not during a race, like
good rule of thumb.
Yeah. And then shortly thereafter, you're like, Yeah, that was very interesting. That threw Josh Berry into the fire there. And of course, William Byron ends up winning in overtime. That was a big moment there for him early on in the season. And of course, we had tons of discussion there about playoff waivers after that race. I threw my hat on during the podcast because you said Chase Elliott should not get a playoff waiver.
I stand by it. I was right. I also said it was going to. There's a very good chance, very very good chance, it could cost him his playoff eligibility. It could cost him his season and
You did
making the
not
playoff.
say that.
Yes, I
You
did.
were
Yes.
completely confident, even at the time, that he was going to win a race.
I said there was still a path for him to do it.
No, you said he was going to win a race. We said we were sure he was going to win a race.
I thought he was going to do. I'm telling you, yes, I thought he was going to make the playoffs. Yes, I thought he was going to win a race. I wasn't disputing it, but I did say this now opened up the possibility of you don't know, and you just put your season at risk because you're going to miss a handful of races, and those handful of races you miss could potentially be the difference between making the playoffs and not making the playoffs. That I did say. Now, my opinion was he was going to make the playoffs, no doubt, because I mean it's Chase Elliott. We thought he was going to win a race, but I did say that this was not a good idea for him to be doing this because you put your season at risk, you jeopardize yourself, and now your season potentially is going in the wrong direction. And look what happened.
Well, I mean, Chase, as recently as last week when we talked to him at Phoenix, he says, look, it's unrealistic to think that would have changed anything. He said, I would have made the playoffs, made the round of 8 like the car did. Okay, sure. But he's like, would I have suddenly won 5 races? Like I got so far behind? No, like the team was off. He did say that was a product of them, the way they left off last season. He thought they were in really bad shape. And he said they're actually leaving off in better shape this year at the end of the season, going in the right direction than they did last year. But that race, the Las Vegas race, ends up not being so good. It actually is the 5th worst race of the year, 48.7%. So people didn't love that for whatever reason. I can't remember that. Was Larson going to win and then Byron won?
Larson was going to win both Las Vegas and Phoenix,
right?
And the circumstances, kind of happened there, and then it, yeah.
And it was a 1-2-3 for Hendrick, by the way.
Yes, it was.
Race. Bowman. All right. So on to Phoenix then, where we have the first penalty drama. Did you just put a thumbs down on my?
No, I have no idea. It just keeps popping up. It's done this throughout. I am not. My hands are right here. I'm not touching anything.
Jordan is putting a thumbs down on my face on the screen while we're recording.
Doing anything.
I've never seen this before.
Neither have I. It's fantastic though. It's a great little thing. I don't know why, but
okay.
it's fantastic when you're making bad points that just keep popping up.
Okay. Well, I don't understand why this is going on.
It only happens too, by the way, when you're talking.
Okay. Well,
now I have a little sad face.
I was trying to do a sad face on you. This is going off the rails. I don't know how to get rid of my sad face.
This is why we don't record the podcast at this time.
We're like over 20 minutes into the podcast, and we're only up to Phoenix.
Yeah,
this is a disaster.
This is going exactly how I thought it was going to go. Like, I don't know how you expected to cram 38 races. Faster. Well, stop talking less, or talk less.
All right. Well, there was a big penalty stuff. This is when they took all the Hendrick louvers, right?
Yeah, and the colleague 31 louvers.
Well, one louver from them, only one.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is it wasn't both colleague cars though? It was off of 31 because that's an important distinction.
Yeah, but wasn't it only one of their louvers off their car?
Yeah, I believe that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so that was a big thing going into this weekend. Oh, what's going to happen to Hendrick? Ends up getting overturned, of course.
We'll get to that.
Yep. Yeah, this was going to be a Harvick win.
That's it. This was the best. I mean, honestly, depends how you feel about the Southern 500, but he was leading. He had a multi-second lead fairly late in this race, and he was going to win when the caution came out and reset everything. And it was like, oh man, Harvick is going to get that final season. He's going to get that monkey off his back right away. 4th race of the year. And okay, well, you know what? He didn't win this week, but He's obviously they're doing well. Stewart-Haas Racing looks like they're in a good spot. He'll get one, you know, he'll get one along the way. And retrospect, that was not the case.
Yeah. Well, Blaney finished second,
Yep.
which we could talk about later. And the race was not very good, actually, overall. It was the fourth worst race of the year on the Was It a Good Race poll, only 44.8%. Back-to-back races under 50 early in the season. That was, you know, not a good sign. There ended up only being 4 more races the entire season that were under 50. So that was just a kind of a blip there. But of course, the huge penalty, you know, talk from this race afterwards was Hamlin gets into Chastain on the last lap, puts him in the wall, and then on his podcast afterwards, which was brand new at the time, says, yeah, I did it on purpose. And then NASCAR decides to act based on the podcast comments, even though they changed the rule to say it didn't have to be intentional. It was really weird. I still totally disagree with that penalty. That was a really bad precedent, especially when there's been other incidents this year where you're like, well, that didn't match to what we saw at times. But anyway, that kind of overshadowed everything going into Atlanta, that whole conversation.
Yeah, I mean, both the Hamlin penalty, absolutely, which was significant. And then going into Atlanta as well, at the same time they announced the Hamlin penalty, they announced the penalties for the Hendrick team and Colleague as well. And so going into Atlanta, the conversation was twofold. It was about Hamlin's penalty and whether that was fair or not. And then it was about the Hendrick penalty and one, because NASCAR hammered them. Remember, NASCAR dropped the hammer on them. And then it was, did NASCAR do the right thing? You know, these are quote unquote spec parts. You know, is there a manufacturing issue with this part that led it to it being faulty, or was Hendrick doing something outside the box? There was conversations about, did Hendrick find something with the Garage 56 program and they were using it over here? That was all the conversation going into Atlanta that week.
And speaking of things being overshadowed, the Cup race was then overshadowed at Atlanta, because in the Xfinity race is when, of course, Josh Williams parks it on the front stretch after, you know, it had felt like NASCAR kind of unfairly told him to park his car after it had some debris. They were tired of all the cautions and the, you know, S show of a Xfinity race. And they were like, nah, this is not gonna, we're not gonna do this. So he just leaves on the front stretch, walks across, and people that got Josh Williams Nation going. They were selling T-shirts. People were all fired up for Josh Williams. But I don't really even remember I remember it came down to the two former Penske teammates, Logano and Keselowski, at Atlanta, but I don't really remember the circumstances. Obviously, Logano ends up winning at his home track. I remember that. That was kind of a big storyline. Anything else to remember about this one?
Two things. One, the Josh Williams issue, if you will, is still something you look back on. You're like, what the heck? And I feel like we're going to be talking about Josh Williams here in the coming weeks, because there's some news that sounds like they may be related to Josh about where he may end up next year. And it's like, you're like, part of me goes like, man, he must have sold a lot of T-shirts from this incident, because, man, okay, if this news is in fact real. And then the second thing is that Sunday race, the battle between Logano and Keselowski, I thought was phenomenal. It was like a high-speed chess match of these two, you know, super speedway aces who know each other so well. And it was like they were just countering each other for the last 30 laps or so. And it was so fun to watch these guys and how they tried to outmaneuver each other.
Well, the poll didn't do great for this one. It ends up as the number 31 race of the year, 52.3%. That's really 3 races in a row early in the season that were 52 and under, essentially. So,
yeah.
And then, no wonder I was in a bad mood the next week at COTA when I was clutching the pearls. The weekend starts off with a look back at Chastain's first career win. He drops watermelons from the tower. Remember that hole?
Yeah, that's right.
That was fun. Like a big giant Gallagher, just smashing it. but this was really notable because this was going to be like, all right, NASCAR has really come into the world of international racing, because you not only had Kimi coming back for his second race with Project 91, but you had Jenson Button trying this race. Jordan Taylor was in this race. And it was like, man, some respectability, for like NASCAR road racing. This is awesome. And then it turned into an absolute clown show on those last restarts. Wasn't it 3 straight restarts? Everybody smashing into each other,
something like that,
out of the way. Suarez incensed after the race, even though it was his own teammate that kind of did it. He smashes into Bowman on pit road, which could have gotten a way worse. I think he got $50,000 fine or something. He could have gotten way worse than that.
Because there was talk about whether he should be suspended or not.
Right. Absolutely.
I mean, it wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. That was a justified conversation.
Yeah. Then, Jordan Taylor afterwards was like, man, I can't believe how these guys are, and Jenson Button too. Just like these guys, the way they race was just absolutely physical. But then, speaking of early season, drama or, achievements and all that, we talked about Kyle Busch with RCR. Well, Tyler Reddick wins pretty much right away with 2311.
Yeah. And Kurt Busch is in the booth as it's happening, and Kurt gets really emotional. And obviously he's going through some things, and his career was forcibly ended, not on his own terms, and he's watching his former team win a race. And big moment for Tyler, obviously, is getting that first win with 2311, and then hearing Kurt in the booth and what it meant to him and what it was like watching someone else basically drive his car to victory lane.
And you mentioned here as well that this is when Zane Smith's truck caught on fire, celebrating the win. Not the only time we saw stuff like that this year.
Nope.
But after that, I was really in a bad mood after that one.
Never happens.
I was really, really, and you know what though? I felt justified later, because so much of the industry talk after that was, we can't let this happen again. That was, then they changed.
I was going to say this was the catalyst, though. This was the catalyst for the change, because the next road course race was going to be Sonoma, which is a little bit more calmer of a race on restarts and stuff. But then the idea is going into Chicago, we cannot have Chicago and Indianapolis particularly. We cannot have restarts like we have in these races, because
they changed it for Portland first, right?
Yeah, they did change it for Portland first. They tried it out with the restart zone in the Xfinity Series, and but this was the catalyst.
Right, and everybody still has referred to this race as, that was the clown show kind of stuff. That was, so sometimes in the moment, I feel like, man, I'm the one being negative here, and I'm just kind of an outlier, and you're saying I'm clutching the pearls. But then guess what, Jordan? I'm right every once in a while. Everyone's broken clock is right twice a day, Jeff. Yep. So then Richmond, which was a strategy race, but people, even though it was a strategy race, people liked this one. Yeah. People said this was the number 15 race of the year, was 80.1%. I think me still being in a bad mood, I think I was just like, man, another Richmond race. But a lot of people are like, no. Yeah. This was actually, they liked the strategy. I think Fox must have sold it well or something. It wasn't the short track race that you're looking for, but it's what you sort of expect from Richmond. Larson wins this one. Barry comes all the way up to finish second, which was a big statement for him after he didn't really run well at Vegas, and hadn't really been looked, super great while subbing, yet for Elliott. But what else do you remember about this Richmond one? I think you were there. It's not the race itself. I mean, the race itself is whatever, but the story that week going into the weekend was the Hendrick penalties, because the penalties got basically essentially overturned. And yeah, I know there were some of the penalties that remained in place, but it didn't matter, like the crew chief suspensions, right? But they got their points back. Remember? That was the big thing. So basically, for all intent purposes, Hendrick won its appeal. Like, let's just keep it simple. Hendrick won its appeal, and the garage that weekend, and we wrote about it in The Athletic, and I'd recommend going back and read it, was like aghast of like,
NASCAR's trying to do the right thing here. They're trying to crack down on penalties and all of this stuff. And this panels appeal just basically gave Hendrick all of its, penalties back, except for the crew chief suspensions, which doesn't matter. And it's like, what the hell? And like terms like Wild Wild West. And now it's going to be it's a free for all. That's how it was. That was the mood going into the weekend. And that's what everybody was talking about.
And that's when you did your anonymous crew chief story that was really
Yeah.
a big talker. Yeah. But then you remember what happens after this though, in post-race inspection, right? They take Byron and Bowman back to the R&D center. The first and second place finishers were Hendrick cars. They got cleared. They take those cars back to the R&D center and they find more stuff. Then they give them 60-point penalties going into Bristol Dirt. Byron was in like the worst, most sour mood ever. He was pissed. He was so pissed. And that ended up costing him the regular season championship, right? Those 60 points, I believe.
Yeah, that is correct. It had an impact for sure.
Yeah. So anyway, then you get to Bristol Dirt, which obviously I don't, I blocked it.
Jeff, how great of a weekend is that, Bristol? How much are you going to miss Bristol Dirt next year? What does it mean to you that Bristol Dirt is no longer on the schedule? I mean, have you filled that hole in your heart, that void that is now there? I mean, I know you get emotional about Fontana, but it's okay now to admit Bristol Dirt is number one in your heart.
I am a little bit bummed to not have the opportunity to do a wrap.
So are a lot of people.
These parents came up to me on near the championship stage at Phoenix, and they said, "Excuse me, our daughter is a really big fan of your rap." And I said, "What?"
No.
This girl, I apologize if you're listening and I'm messing up your age, but she's maybe, I would guess maybe 11 or 12. She's like, "I really love your rap," and she could like recite some of it and stuff.
Oh my God. No way.
So they're like, "What are you gonna?" Yeah, I'm serious. It was amazing. I was like, "Wow!"
You didn't immediately bring them over to introduce them to me?
You actually stopped by and talked. And
You
then
didn't
left.
tell me this when I stopped there?
Well, you were actually working and busy.
Yeah, I would have written a 3,000 word story on her.
She knew some of the lines from my rap all these months later. Like she had listened to it repeatedly. That was amazing.
Did she not have friends?
I think she was a normal person. She just has good taste.
Yeah. I mean, your rap is entertaining as hell. I said this before, it's well written and you do a great job with it. I just can't imagine a small child saying, "Hey, I want to remember every single word of this." And, wow.
Yeah.
Who knew? Maybe you're like the clown dude, whatever that clown's name is.
I'm a clown?
Well, what's the clown that not Dippo? What's the other clown? The clown at Daytona.
Diplo?
What's the clown? The fake
Blippy?
clown? Blippy. Maybe you're like the new Blippy. Maybe you're like the NASCAR version of Blippy. And
Blippy can't rap.
No, but you're the NASCAR version of that, and this is the rapping NASCAR clown.
How can you compare Diplo and Blippy?
They're all Diplo, Blippy. It's the same. There's just similar sounding.
Can we please move on? Oh my gosh. Anyway, Bell won this race. Again, don't really remember. This was the number 24 race of the year, 66%. Also, going into this one, we thought was going to be a big storyline at the time until he got a huge penalty later. But Chase Briscoe breaks his finger in a dirt late model race the week before this and was suffering. We're like, oh, he made the round of 8, last year. Before that, well, how's this going to affect him? Well, it didn't, because he got like a 120-point penalty later. So it didn't really matter anyway.
Stewart-Haas did not win a race. And
is there anything else? You have Larson with mini meltdown feuding with Priest.
Yeah, I remember that was kind of an interesting thing. It was a race that Larson kind of threw away. I will say Bell won this race. He was the points leader at the time. It kind of felt like him coming off a championship 4 run the year before. It felt like he was kind of coming into his own. It kind of felt like we were going to have a year of Bell, if you will. Does that make sense? Like this is a guy who was like poised to win a bunch of races and really become a dominating force. That's what it felt like at the time.
And then he didn't for a long time.
And then he did. But he almost, he'd been making the championship for.
Yeah. So, but later he started winning. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just at that time, it really felt like he was, we always talk about like the summer of Larson or, that kind of thing. It felt like it was going to be the summer of Bell.
That's what you took from a dirt race?
I mean, kind of the whole thing. He won a race early in the year. He's the points leader. Like, expectations were high and it was like, okay.
All right, so now is the very, very forgettable Martinsville spring race.
Yeah.
Rated the lowest race, worst race of the year in the Was a Good Race poll, 37%. Larson won this one where at a track where he had previously been terrible in the past. He had joked after, remember the time he fainted or whatever, and he didn't get to race right the next day.
2015, yeah.
And he joked later that he was glad that was the one he missed because he was so bad there. But he obviously figured it out, wins that race. Chase Elliott also returns this one. For me, this was the most notable for Priest won the pole, was dominating early, dominating. I think he led triple-digit laps or something.
He led, they consecutively. And then
he led like the entire first stage or something. And then he sped on. He had the same thing that Truex had.
He did.
He had the first pit stall, and he sped on pit road, lost the track position, and that was the end. That was probably it was his only chance to win this year, really.
Yeah, best chance for sure. And went away because of the penalty. And and his teammate just Chase Briscoe led like 100 some laps too in that race, and so neither of them won. And biggest takeaway for this real quick: Chase Elliott came back after his absence. The car wasn't great early, but he rallied to finish in the top 10. And it was like, okay, Chase is back. Feels like, obviously he's not 100%, but he still can knock out top 10 finishes. Now they're going to get back going again. And, before too long, he'll be in victory lane and punching his playoff ticket. Oops.
So we go to Talladega, and this one is the number 23 race of the year, 67% on the Was a Good Race poll. This one, Kyle Busch ends up winning to make Richard Childress very happy, and you had a lot of good vibes early there as Kyle Busch has now won 2 of the first 10 races. That was really big for them, and another super speedway where Kyle Busch looks good after he could have won the Daytona 500, but he wasn't going to win. Right, because Bubba was doing pretty well in this race, right?
Yeah, Bubba was leading on the last lap, I believe, and he was blocking Blaney. I think he was either second or third. They were going to make a run. I forgot how it worked out, but Bubba was well positioned to win this race, and Blaney was coming though too. Bubba threw a block, and he threw multiple blocks, and the last one caught Blaney's bumper and ended up crashing him out. And no fault of Blaney or anything like that, but it was 2 good friends, and wondering how that played out. And Blaney finished the second. Bubba crashes out. No hard feelings between them, but the race ended underneath caution, and Kyle Busch wins. And it was notable again because Kyle isn't really noted for his super speedway racing or his luck on super speedways, and he could have won both those, right? He could have won both Daytona and Talladega.
And of course, this is the race where Priest had the cockpit incursion into Kyle Larson's car, which prompted some safety changes. NASCAR. They reacted fairly quickly on this. I mean, probably as quick as they could. They had some improved testing, and really strengthened that side of the car, and were very transparent about it. Showed a lot of in-car videos, testing videos later, stuff like that. So that was positive. You also have here that this was the last race before Bowman got hurt in a sprint car, and at the time, he was having a great season.
Points leader at one point before the penalties. Had the best average finish. And remember, I don't want to like toot my horn.
He was still 10th in points to this point, even after the penalty, where he would have been only 1 point out because that was 60 points right there. So,
have you heard what Bowman has said about his future in sprint car racing? By the way,
he's done.
He's done because it's not worth it.
Well, I'm sure that makes you happy.
I'm just saying.
Doesn't mean he's not going to go, water skiing and snowboarding and stuff like that, right?
Well, I mean, you take that risk. That's fine.
All right. On to Dover, another rainy Dover weekend. But this was the one where Truex breaks through for his first points race win in quite a while. Also, this was notable for Larson was potentially at race winning speed. It was pretty early, but Chastain drove over his head as a precursor for couple weeks to come. And they were very upset with Chastain for that. They were like, why are you making this move early on a, was it a lapped car or something?
He got into, he got into Larson, and then Larson got into Brennan Poole, who was a lap car.
That's right. That's what
and it wasn't anything. There wasn't anything Poole could have done. I think that's right, or something of that nature. I forgot how it worked out. Maybe he got into Poole, who got into Larson.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was. Something like that.
Yeah.
He was being too impatient trying to pass.
Yeah. He got into Poole, who got into Larson, and then that was it. And that set the tone. That was that. And I just want to go back really quick, too, because we're going to talk about the Talladega, too. Chastain and Gregson had a moment on the racetrack where Gregson ends up crashing, and that's going to come into play in a few weeks as well at Kansas.
Well, and don't forget also, the tide had started to turn in Chastain's favor because, like at Richmond, Bell had an incident by himself, and he said, I got Chastain or something. And everybody, so it became a meme of like, well, everybody's just blaming for Chastain for everything. He's not really always the guy that's doing this stuff. And then stuff like Dover happens and you're like, oh, well, and then obviously Darlington's coming up and Kansas. So anyway, Dover got a 76.3%, number 17 race of the year. So off to Kansas, which is the number 1 race in the Good Race Bowl for this year, 93.3%. Another great intermediate race with the next gen car. Denny Hamlin wins this one. And this was probably most notable for the Ross Chastain, Noah Gragson fight on pit road. Socked him.
Well, I mean, I think there's 2 things that's notable. I think one is how Denny Hamlin won, because he got into Kyle Larson on the last lap.
They were not. Well, this one, unlike the
racing incident, I'm not assigning blame. I'm just saying that this was,
I think Hamlin put him in a bad position. Yeah, but Larson also kind of got up into the wall himself.
Oh, turn 2. Yeah. No, this was a racing incident, but it was the first of this time, where these friends, and had, this wouldn't be the only time this year where they'd have a moment like this.
Yeah, but I think like the Pocono one later was a little bit more on a lot more Denny than this one was. Yeah. But I think Larson, I'm not sure they ever actually touched at the Kansas one.
I don't think they did.
Larson just was high and he hit the wall coming up off the corner, but
he got arrowed. But the fight on pit road was what?
Yeah. So Chastain, Gragson, I mean, that was the talk for a long time after that.
Because Gragson was the first driver to like physically confront Chastain after all of this stuff. And because like Chase Elliott what did Chase Elliott say to him? Like, hey, good job or something. Like he offered like kudos.
It looked like, you right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they caught that. They caught him saying that. Like, like you said, somebody had to do it.
Somebody had to do it, yeah. And Chastain handled business, man.
Yeah, well, he grabbed Noah's arm. Remember that? Everybody's talking about.
He grabbed the wrist, control it. It's like a hockey fight.
And then bam. That was
with the jab.
But Gragson took the punch pretty good.
Yeah, for sure.
And then, of course, afterwards, this was the one of the Denny memes of the year where Bob was going to show Denny the fight video after getting off the stage. And Denny comes off the stage and I'm videoing it. Remember this? And Denny has that reaction of like,
Denny
has some good memes at times. So
Denny was, between Denny and Ross, the 2 of them we owe them like a flowers or something, because they gave us a lot of content this year.
Well, not really though, because coming up at Darlington now, this was sort of the last we heard from Ross for a while.
Yeah, with the exception of
this was Darlington Spring Race, number 12 race of the year, 83.4%.
Wild. Just wild.
So yeah, tell us what you remember about it. You were there.
Well, I mean, it felt like this was like peak Ross. We're talking about Ross Chastain like every single week. People are criticizing him. He's too aggressive. He's doing Ross things. By the way, it's working for him because he's leading the point standings and he's finishing well. But he is not winning races. And it was like he was throwing away good race after good race, potential wins, and that kind of thing. So you could make a case either way. And so it's just like we're talking about Ross every single week. Going to Darlington, same thing happens. Racing Martin Truex Jr. for the lead late. They get into it. Truex spins out. His race is effectively over. Ross goes on. And then he and Kyle Larson, and you want to pick it up from here, they had, 2 or 3 restarts there, and they were bumping and banging and beating on each other, and then they end up both wrecking.
Yeah, and then of course Rick Hendrick comes in this media center afterwards. I think it was Dustin Long asked him about it.
Yeah.
And he tees off on Chastain.
Yeah.
This seemed to put a lot of pressure on Trackhouse. There was speculation that Chevy got involved, though Justin Marks later said that wasn't the case. But Marks then goes on Dave Moody's show on Sirius for his weekly appearance and says, yeah, we had to, I had to talk with Ross, about some things and all this stuff. And everybody's like, oh gosh, you're not new to Ross, are you? Like, don't listen to, isn't he doing well? Like, isn't he doing what you want him to do? What's going on here? And then, at North Wilkesboro, then it goes to North Wilkesboro the next week, and Chastain is racing one of the late model things there or something.
Yeah. Yep.
And you asked him, a couple other people got him.
Myself, Bob, and Dustin were there. The 3 of us were there, and we talked to him for about 15 minutes or so, and he was opened up about what that week was like and how it was one of the toughest he's ever been through, and what that conversation with Justin was like. And he had spoken to Rick, and it was just, and the conversation then, and it kind of continued this way really up until Nashville, this was a start, coincidentally or not or whatever. Trackhouse was not the same performance-wise after Darlington for the most part. Now, they had blips. Obviously, they won Phoenix, won Nashville. But that really started after Darlington, the downturn for them performance-wise. And then it was like, wait a second. You guys are struggling on the racetrack, and Justin said this about how Ross needs to kind of rein it in. What is there a correlation between the two? And so, yeah, and Ross kind of talked about that too a little bit, about how he was told to kind of bring it back in, and he needs to do a better job of finishing races and such.
Yeah, and again, it seemed like it was coincidence ultimately, because it seemed like the whole team's performance just suddenly dropped off a cliff.
Yeah.
But at the time, I mean, even in the moment, we're like, man, what is happening here? Why would you do this? Why would anybody try to pull the reins on Chastain? Now, you could make the argument, as you did at the time, about them leaving a lot of wins on the table, and then you look further down the road and you go, man, if he had, let's say he gets, I don't know, 15 more playoff points or something, right? Like he'd been able to convert 3 wins early, is higher in the points, doesn't have DNFs, has more bonus points for the playoffs, and ultimately, like, the guy ends up winning the season finale. Yeah. So like
it would probably got him out of the second round of the playoffs.
Yeah, and that was Talladega that did it to him, because there was a mistake there. But maybe that,
those 15 points. Yeah, I mean, it's just they left a lot of wins. They left a lot of, let's just say, they left a lot of wins on the table, a lot.
But they still didn't have the speed ultimately after this.
No.
That they, but that was definitely the huge talking points at the moment, at the time. So then it was off to North Wilkesboro, which was really one of just the signature weekends of the year. The vibes were impeccable. I mean, everybody was in such a great mood just to see it back. The track looked great. Everybody was so happy. I don't think the traffic ended up really ever materializing to the point that people thought it was going to.
It wasn't the horror show that people thought at all. Yep. They did a really great job. I mean, we make fun of Speedway Motorsports a lot for various reasons, sometimes unfairly so, but they did a fantastic job, one, of refurbishing North Wilkesboro and turning it into what it is now, which is great. And they did a great job of managing that weekend where there was no blips. There was no traffic problems, because everybody thought going in that there was going to be a traffic nightmare. There was none of that. There was no issues at the concession stand. They had a flawless weekend, and kudos to them for figuring out and executing it as well as they did.
Well, the only bad part was the race.
Yeah.
The Open was
Other
good
than
with
that,
McDowell.
Lincoln, how was the play?
Yeah. McDowell, in the Open, it was pretty entertaining because you had McDowell chasing down Ty Gibbs, was it?
Yeah.
Really
they got into it. Yep. In the Open,
he retaliated, right? Didn't he?
Yep.
He got him and retaliated, I think.
He went after him. He talked about, I don't know if he actually did or not, because Ty ended up moving on to advancing. So
Oh, I thought he bumped him or something as
he
he
might
came
have.
by.
He talked about it, and he might have a little bit, but it didn't actually impact him because Ty ended up advancing to the.
Gotcha.
I think.
Well, the race wasn't very good, and
No.
ended up being the number 33 race of the year. Larson completely dominated, had a way faster car, got a 49.8%. And I think honestly, like the
It doesn't even matter, does it?
49.8% was
High.
that was high because of just people were happy North Wilkesboro was back. But if that just been
Yeah.
like a straight up race, that would have been the worst race of the year. I think that was a
100%.
really bad race, really bad.
Horrible. And it's too bad because there was all of this excitement and all this attention. And if you could have had just a decent race, I think it would have done wonders. And the other part of me says, though, it doesn't even matter necessarily. The race almost feels like an afterthought, which, I don't know if that's good or bad.
You could say that for year one, but
yeah. Oh no, for you too. And they repaved. They repaved this week.
So now that's probably going to be. Yeah, I don't know what that's going to do for this
We're gonna
package.
see.
Well, they're testing the short track package at Phoenix in December, so maybe there's hope. But anyway, then it was off to the Coke 600. I went to the Indy 500. You went to the Coke 600, and seemingly out of nowhere, because at the time, all the talk was about how Ford had done nothing except for Joey Logano up till the 600 in late May. Logano winning that super speedway race at Atlanta was the only Ford win.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, when Ryan Blaney wins the 600, that's still only Ford's second win all the way up until Richmond on July 30th.
Mm-hmm.
So in the first 21 races of this season, Ford gets 2 wins. We assume they're a complete non-factor for the championship and the playoffs. They look like they're in big trouble as a manufacturer as a whole, up until Buescher figures it out, which we'll talk about coming up. But this Blaney 600 win, that was a big moment for him. His first crown jewel win. The race did get rained out. It was just a great race. This ends up as the number 2 race of the year, even though it's almost, almost a 5-hour race, 91.2% in the poll, 4-hour, 59-minute race, and Blaney wins it.
Like 16 cautions too, or something, some huge number of cautions.
Yeah, but people were,
people loved it. It was fantastic. Yeah. And it didn't feel long. Like you had all these cautions. It's NASCAR's longest race. It didn't feel like a 600-mile race. It flew by. It felt
it was on that Monday too.
It was on that Monday.
Because it got postponed because of rain.
Which would become a recurring theme through the next few months.
Yeah.
And it was fantastic. It was fantastic. It was great. It was a breakthrough win for Blaney after a long winless drought. It was a big deal for Ford. And it felt like they had maybe turned the corner a little bit. And then obviously there's another moment too that happened in that race that a lot of people are talking about.
Yeah, obviously the Elliott intentional crash of Hamlin, which we immediately said, well, that's got to be a suspension based on the Bubba Larson precedent from the year earlier. And then NASCAR, as much as I'm sure they didn't love it, they suspend Elliott for Gateway the next week, which was, they had to do it. I mean, Elliott put them in a position where they had to do it.
Yeah. And kudos to NASCAR for doing it. Like, then from what I understand, like there was no hesitation or anything like that. That was an immediate. All the decision makers involved knew, like, we don't have a choice. That we have to suspend him.
And look, I mean, 31 lead changes at an intermediate race, coming off the 37 lead changes at Kansas, the 28 lead changes at Fontana. It's just like, man, the intermediate track package when it's clicking right. It's a beautiful thing, like it was in this one. So, yeah, I mean, excuse me. Anything else from that weekend that jumped out?
Nope.
Okay.
No, those are the big things.
It's on the Gateway. And that really, even though Kyle Busch won this one, I don't really remember that part of it as much as the big talk about LaJoie filling in for Elliott and not having a good race.
Yep. That was a struggle. And it was, this was Corey LaJoie's big opportunity with a big time team. He had really kind of built his career up slowly, stacking pennies. And Spire and that 7 team had done a really good job this year. They had been running well. And here was Corey getting tabbed because the Xfinity Series was out in Portland. They couldn't lean on Josh Berry. They asked Corey to get in that race car. Here was Corey's opportunity. What was he going to do with it? And it did not go well. In qualifying, he struggled. I think he actually brushed the wall in qualifying. And then the race itself, early on, he had an issue. He hit the kill switch or something of that nature, and he just struggled. And eventually, towards the end, he kind of got better and he moved up a little bit, but it was not the weekend that some thought that Corey LaJoie was going to have.
Yeah, sorry. I'm getting choked up here with my froggy voice, but
You thinking about Fontana or what?
this was also notable because this was host of our shining moment.
This is host of our debut, and host of our got in Corey's car and really did a good job. Listen, I know you're going to miss Bristol Dirt, Jeff. It's okay. You can just open up and talk about it. I'm here to listen for you. You can just share your feelings in an open, safe space. It's okay.
I'm fine. I even have a cough drop in. I'm still doing this. So just carry me for a little bit here until I recover.
That's what I'm here for. But host of our debut and was running very, very well in that 7 car. Before he had a mechanical failure, had a brake rotor. That was an issue in this race too, which is kind of a precursor, I guess, to championship 4 a little bit. There was a rash of guys who had brake rotor failures, and ended up crashing. Bubba had one. I think Reddick did too. Host of our did, and so yeah. But he did a really good job of impressing in his Cup debut.
It's a good point about the brake rotors, because remember the conversation afterwards was like, well, this is just sort of a gateway thing because the way the track is shaped, like the brakes, they cool and heat up again, and it expands them, and with the long straightaways that they have there. But we probably won't see this again except for Gateway, and then poor Christopher Bell in the.
I was going to say Christopher Bell would like to say, excuse me,
which was a similar style track.
It is
a little bit. So, all right,
Sonoma.
on to Sonoma. This one.
Right.
Was by the way, the Gateway race, was number 25 of the year, 65.3%. On to Sonoma, which was not a good race.
Yeah, Truex won.
Not much Truex dominated. And this was really like Truex's back, because he had really struggled at Sonoma the year before.
Mm-hmm.
And he looked like completely out to lunch. And then he comes back and it's like, oh yeah, when you give him a good car, he can do this kind of thing. This race obviously didn't have the stage breaks, and people were starting to go, oh, is this good? I don't know. Maybe it's not so good. If Denny doesn't crash at the start finish line while racing Byron for, I don't know, 7th or something. It wasn't, I don't know.
It was something that's happening.
Yeah. That there might not have been any cautions for a while. Also, I remember this one because this was sort of the start of NASCAR. I think it was the start of NASCAR being transparent, showing off illegal parts that they had confiscated and stuff. And then also, Shaq was supposed to do a DJ concert at pre-race, and he was late. I guess there was a lot of traffic. Remember, Kyle Busch, I was supposed to do an interview with him. He was late too.
You had 12 questions with Kyle Busch.
Yeah, he was late. So there was a lot of traffic that weekend. Shaq was late, so then he ended up staying afterward to do a post-race concert. And you had this picture of him and Truex, where Truex, who's not that short, looks like a tiny little guy compared to Shaq. And Truex was just like, yeah, I mean, they brought me out of victory lane, they brought me backstage to meet Shaq or whatever. And it was like, he was a nice guy, sure, whatever. But I think he said he had met him before. Maybe
they met him.
Jr. was doing the race
TV show,
Shaq versus show or whatever. Yeah.
Yep.
So that was not a good race. Again, 3rd worst race of the year, 43.2%.
Less said, the better.
Then it's on to Nashville, where the previously unheard from Ross Chastain suddenly jumps up and wins in Trackhouse's hometown. You're like, oh, well, geez, we hadn't really heard from him, but here he is back. I don't really remember anything about that other than Chastain winning.
Yeah, I mean, Truex had led a lot of laps, was in contention. Hamlin was in contention, I think he led the most laps, but Chastain won him going away, and he kind of did it in a clean manner. And it was like, whoa, bad. They went through this little mini slump. He's back. Justin Marks came in the media center afterwards, and there was a lot of questions about his remarks a few weeks prior to that, and whether they were pulling in Ross Chastain, and he kind of clarified that a little bit. And just was a lot of excitement because this was Trackhouse's home win. The other big thing from this race is Ryan Blaney had a really bad crash. He ended up crashing, head on into a unprotected concrete wall. That for whatever reason, it was decided that they didn't need the safety barrier there. And that was like, whoa, really? And that happened on a restart. And it was like one of those crashes. You're like, man, you can't have it. Like if there's a concrete wall on the racetrack anywhere, it needs to have a safer barrier on it. It felt like we were going down a road we had been down many times before and having conversations that frankly, we thought we were done having.
Well, that brings us to Chicago. And boy, was that a tremendously memorable weekend for a lot of different reasons. It starts off so well. Everybody's in this great mood doing the track walk. Everybody's staying at these hotels, like pretty much right across the street from the track. It was, you got there and you're like, wow, NASCAR really did this. Like they really built this street course in Chicago.
They pulled it off.
It looked really good. It looked absolutely world class.
It was a Jurassic Park moment.
Fencing and yeah, that's right. It was just, you're like, this is really cool. I mean, this is like one of the coolest things they've ever done, ever.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, then just out of seemingly nowhere during the Xfinity race, there's a lightning strike, which delays things. And there's like another one. And it's like, well, the rain might not even come. And they're like, well, that's it. The race is over. And we're going to have to evacuate. They end up calling the Xfinity race short, right? Like,
yeah, it was a few laps short of halfway. It was a few laps short of halfway.
Unprecedented. Then the rain like really, 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 really starts, right?
And it didn't stop.
And then it was just like a biblical flood, where it wasn't just some rainstorm. It was like, it sat over the track and kept swirling and swirling. And the next morning, we didn't even want to go to the track because it was like so rainy to walk, 5 blocks. You're going to get soaked. And it's looking grim. It's looking like, what's going to happen here? Can they even race? Like,
yeah. And is the race can they move it to Monday? Because
can they even do it?
Yeah. Can they do it? This race is in downtown Chicago. Can they race on Monday? And, what's going to happen? Is it going to be postponed? How late can they go? There was just all of this uncertainty about what was going to happen.
Did you just put the thumbs down on me again?
I was talking and the thumbs down came out. So I don't know why I would do it to myself.
Okay. Anyway, but yeah, the concerts got canceled. Remember that? Like,
oh yeah,
the Chainsmokers concert. I was really hoping to bring you the Chainsmokers concert, and you had said you refused because you do your best work on a Saturday night.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I know what I did at Saturday night. I worked. I did a good job.
Okay, good for you. Congrats. Anyway, well, actually, no, we went to dinner on that Saturday.
We went to dinner, and then I ditched you. Well, I didn't ditch you. I asked you if you. No. Let me rephrase that. I asked if you wanted to continue the night with me, as I was going to go out and
do your best work.
Do my best work, and you were like, "No, I'm going back to bed." And I'm like, "All right,
yeah, I'm going back to the hotel. Screw that."
And I got back at like 2 a.m. or 2:30, something like that, after a few cocktails.
Yeah. So we also we forgot we had NASCAR night at Wrigley.
Yeah, that's right.
John Nemechek, Harrison Burton, and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. sang the 7th inning stretch. They had all these NASCAR themed things at the Cubs game.
Yeah.
But there were some really weird things about this weekend too. Like they ended up bringing the national anthem people, which I don't even think ever aired on TV.
I don't think so.
Because the way that they had to start the show, they did the national anthem from inside the media center, like on this little stage. It was such a weird, because like nobody really clapped. But I guess the people in the media center clapped afterwards. Then Justin Fields, the Bears quarterback, comes in and does the command from inside the media center because it was raining. But they end up getting somehow remember, there's all these pictures on pit road and stuff. The course is like this much flooded. Like there's all these inches of water. It's like, look at how they're going to clear this. They end up draining the course. They end up getting the race started. The first part, has all the, chaos and stuff. The drivers keep going into the barriers in that one turn.
I think it was turn 6, maybe.
Noah Gragson went into those
like 5 times,
like multiple times.
Truex was in there a couple times. Harvick got in there.
Tyler Reddick go in while he was leading or something?
No, that was Christopher Bell. He was leading early, and he got, I think it was Christopher Bell.
I thought
Denny Hamlin.
Reddick had a mistake there too.
Yeah, maybe it was.
There's
it
this
was a
one
lot.
part where the whole track got blocked, and then they messed up this. There was
The
this
scoring.
controversial scoring thing, and then
Yeah.
of course they come on the radio and say, "Hey, you know what? We're gonna have to cut this race short due to
Mhm, 'cause
darkness,"
of
which had got
darkness.
a late start. But it turned out that they would. You looking back, they would never have gotten the full race in anyway.
Yeah.
They would have had to cut it short anyway due to darkness, even if it had been because there were so many cautions, it was taking so long.
Yeah.
They have since cut the distance for next year, so that's good. But of course, Shane Van Gisbergen,
Who?
he had been a story a little bit coming to the weekend. He looked good in practice, he looked good in qualifying, but it was like, can he really because we had just seen Raikkonen, Jensen Button. We're like,
Yeah, there's a difference
maybe he'll
between
finish top 10.
Yeah, there's a difference between practicing and qualifying well, because Jordan Taylor qualified well at COTA, qualified 4th. And then once the race starts, it's a whole different ball game. Plus, you've got pit stops and everything else. And it was like, if he can go there and finish top 10, he's gonna be really good about that. No one thought. I couldn't believe he won. I'm still from away.
In his first career Cup start, just comes over,
Makes it look so
from
easy.
Australia Supercars, kicks everybody's butt. There was a lot of talk afterwards from the drivers of like, is this good or bad?
Yeah.
Drivers were mixed on like, did this make us look, embarrassing or not? But it turned out, because he came back for another road course race and didn't do quite. Still did fine, but like these were the perfect circumstances, right? For him to, he's already a street course ace. It was a track nobody had ever been at before. Nobody ever seen before. Wet conditions for a lot of it. And he, had driven the closest similar cars. It's not like IndyCar coming over. Australia Supercars are the most similar to Cup cars, and it just all worked out perfectly. And now he's going to be able to parlay that into a NASCAR career. We'll see what his exact plans are for next year in terms of how many races he does in what series and all that kind of stuff. But he's clearly making a go at it. And you could say almost, I don't know how much you directly attribute to the Chicago weekend, but that was big for him. That was a pretty big moment. And it was unbelievably impressive.
It was such a big moment that it went from this was going to be a one-off to all of a sudden to, this is going to become something potentially more, which it is now becoming that is now he's going to come over here and run full time. And so, yeah, this really was the domino effect that got things, going. And
this was the number 10 race of the year, the best road/street course race of the year at 84.5%. I think the racing was better than everybody expected as well. Because I remember everybody thought, hey, this is going to be a bad race, this layout, is this going to be anything decent at all? And it was way better. So I'm very excited for this for year 2 to see if they can have a clean weekend and how that all goes. So we start the second half of the season now. Well over an hour into our podcast. The second half of the podcast won't take as long because we don't have as many memories from recent stuff, that we don't have to remind people of, I guess. But this season felt very top heavy. You mean early? It was a lot more eventful. A lot of this stuff happened earlier on, and that's so later. True. A lot of the big storylines were whether it's the penalties, the Chastain drama, the Chicago stuff, North Wilkesboro. The fight, right? It's just Kyle Busch winning it back. It started to get kind of quiet for a while there. Yeah, I would say. We talked about that in the playoffs and how the playoffs they felt very kind of muted. Yeah. So it's off to Atlanta. That was a rain shortened race. Byron won. I don't really remember much about it, but people thought it was a good race. I think the rain, knowing that the rain was coming was what really made that race great, right? There was an urgency to that race. It ends up as the number 5 race of the year. Wow. I would not have guessed that. 87.0. So 87%. That was people really liked it. I don't know. I think it was one of those things where you knew it was going to get rain shortened probably, and who's going to get out front. Winning move, by the way, just quickly, winning move of moving that race from the middle of the day where it had been and hot and awful conditions to evening race. So good move there. That was a Sunday night. So that opened the door for more Sunday night events too, instead of Saturday night. Then New Hampshire, which, I always sort of associate rain with New Hampshire, but I didn't realize there had never been a rain out there until this year. Because there have been rain delays, and rainy weekends and stuff, but I guess never a rain out. But that was Truex's revenge, sort of he probably should have won that race last year until a bad pit call. This year he finishes it off, gets it done. I think really felt like he was sort of unchallenged there, and that only reaffirmed that was the number 26 race of the year, by the way, 65.2%. But that at the time we thought, hey, are these results that we're seeing at New Hampshire, is this the last best test before Phoenix? And we thought there was a lot of reason to think yes, because you had Truex, he was on his way to winning the regular season championship. He leads 254 out of 301 laps there. And it's like, well, yeah, these are probably going to be who you're looking at. You have Larson finished third. But when you look down, Blaney, I don't think Blaney had a memorable race on that one. Where is Blaney?
But that's a little unfair. He was running, he was in like second, third. He was running very, very well. And they had an issue on pit road. I don't know if he sped or the team had a mistake or something, that's what dropped him down. I can look really quick, but that was the problem. He was running.
You're
very,
right.
Very well.
He finished third in stage 2.
Yeah, and he had an issue on pit road, so that was why he fell down.
Makes
Don't
sense.
ask me why I remember these things.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the top 5 in stage 2, and it was Truex, Larson, Blaney, Logano, Hamlin. So there's a lot of reason to think at that point, like these are the type of people who we think are going to be, could contend at Phoenix. But anyway, it didn't really work out that way for Truex once playoffs happened, of course. Then it was off to Pocono, where pretty decent race. It's a number 14 race of the year, 81.1. Of course, the big notable headline here is Hamlin and his good friend Kyle Larson get into it. Hamlin wins the race, says, "You can boo my rock out here." Afterwards, he's getting booed. You have I had taken that video of the 5 team on pit road standing there, arms crossed as Hamlin does the burnout going by them. Larson was way outspoken after this race for his standards, blasting Denny. The buddies always know Denny's always right. All that stuff. I remember at this race, Hendrick, the PR was trying to get Larson like, "Hey, let's get out of here after you do TV. Like, we don't want, you don't need to do all this media stuff." And Larson said, "No, I'm not afraid to do media." And he stood there and he did all the media, which of course, as a media person, you really appreciate. And he answered all the questions and was very frank about how this is going to, change their relationship in some ways. But he said they'd probably still play golf. But I think this definitely had some big moments. I mean, you had the thing here with there's the Austin Dillon hard crash, and he threw his helmet at Reddick. Forgot about that. And then
former teammate.
The big Logano, the audio of him blasting the tow truck driver.
Oh yes. Just melting down because he's got the flat tires. He's in turn 1 and his car's backwards. He's basically a beached whale.
Yeah.
Tow truck drivers coming there and they're having all sorts of issues and trying to figure it out. And he is just melting down.
Hey! That was, oh my God, that was one of the best moments of the entire season. That was hilarious.
That was good.
And I thought his anger was justified. Like he wasn't,
I think
tires shouldn't beat you like that, but anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to criticize like that. I mean, you're in the middle of a competition. This is competing, and
they're not understanding what he wanted him to do. And he's like, "That's what I'm trying to tell you."
Yeah, so I get it.
Yeah. So then it was another Richmond one, and this was really where these next 2 weeks were sort of the where did Chris Buescher come from? Kind of thing, where Chris Buescher goes out and wins Richmond like convincingly, right? And you're like, wow, okay. Well, what is this about? It wasn't that great of a race. I mean, it got the number 30 race of the year, got a 53.9%. But Buescher, I mean, it was just like, whoa.
Boom. Yeah,
Okay.
we all expected like Hendrick to be well, or Joe Gibbs Racing is always really good here. It was not, Chris was not somebody, and he was having a fine season up until then, but he didn't look like he was ready to break through and get a win, and especially not at Richmond. And lo and behold.
Yeah, because both he and Keselowski were, let's see, Buescher was 13th in points at that point. Keselowski was 11th. Keselowski actually led the most laps in this race, 102. So it was like RFK, okay, do we need to start paying attention to them? And then, there was only 3 cautions in that race. That was not a good race. Then the next weekend at Michigan, it gets postponed, another rain out. I think it started, they didn't get to halfway. I think they got like maybe 80 laps in or something. I had to fly home. Got back in time. But so this was then Buescher wins again, back-to-back weeks, and you're like, what is going on here? That Michigan race was the number 9 race of the year, 85.7%. That was just like, wow, I can't believe it. And it was like, okay, we really, really need to pay attention to Buescher at this point. Really impressive. And that started to turn around the narrative for Ford as well, because again, through to that point in the first 21 races, Ford had won 2 times. We're like, they're a non-factor. Then as the playoffs are starting to approach, all of a sudden Buescher goes out and wins 2 straight races, which will be followed up by a third by Michael McDowell the next week, which we'll get into in a minute. And it was like, okay, maybe Ford has found something here. Like, do we need to start taking them seriously? We were kind of torn. At least we thought we needed to take RFK seriously, and that was sort of their breakout moment. So,
yeah.
That was also the Michigan one was when the Noah Gragson social media post thing broke, and he was replaced at Legacy, and that was the end of that. And he asked for his release later, I guess, or was fired, depending on who you ask.
They parted ways.
Parted ways.
Is probably the verbiage to use there, is they parted ways. Mutually agreed to part ways.
Okay. So then it goes to Indy, where this was the emotional Michael McDowell breakout moment. This was another argument. I thought this race was really entertaining.
I thought it was fantastic. I really did. 1
caution, but I thought you didn't need cautions because you never felt like there was a good race with McDowell the whole time at the end there. Like Elliott was trying to, could Elliott win? Could Elliott, on his bumper, and McDowell had to, drive sort of this flawless race there. And he ends up winning by less than a second, despite an incredibly long run. There was that caution was early in that race, right? Let's see, it was lap 2.
It was early, very early.
Yeah, and then so the entire last 77 laps of that race, of a road course race, go green, and it's decided by less than a second without stages. McDowell just had to drive his guts out, and gets sort of this, it felt like the biggest win of his career because, his family was there. It was more significant than the Daytona 500 win. Just the way he went out and earned it.
Yeah, it wasn't a super speedway. I mean, he said that as much. It was a question I asked him, like, you won Daytona. We're not dismissing winning that, and because you're very good at super speedway races, but to do it on a road course and to do it with a mid-sized team where you're not expected to do this, he admitted like it meant more, and it meant something, and to go out there and to beat the best. And the way they did it, where this wasn't like they backed into it in any way, shape, or form. They just went out there and beat everybody. You don't see that. And it was, I liked that race. And it was disappointing that race ended up being the last for stage breaks.
No, Watkins Glen was next week. That was what torpedoed.
That's right. You're right. Because that was but this set the table though, really.
Right. So you have back-to-back road courses.
Yeah.
This Indy road course is the number 19 race of the year, gets 72.6%. Then you go to Watkins Glen the next week, and it's the second worst race of the year. Again, only 1 caution. Byron wins it, and people just felt like, I think they were over road courses at the time. They didn't feel like it was exciting. It got a 39.6%, and that was the doom of stage breaks. I was trying to be a little bit more positive because I didn't want stage breaks to go away and people to blame him for that. I didn't think that would make a difference in the quality of the racing there. It just that doomed it. It just wasn't good enough. Everybody thought that one, Elliott, this is like Elliott's chance to make the playoffs.
We coming out of Indy, you and I were both in agreement. Elliott was really good at Indy. We're like, he's going to Watkins Glen. This is his race. He is
I
the
said
favorite.
He was going to win it, right?
Yeah, I did too.
Spotter Brett made fun of me on DBC so much because I was like, Elliott is going to win it. Mark my words. This is his. He's absolutely going to get it done. The table's all set for him. He didn't get it done. His teammate won instead. And
and not only did he not win, he ended up struggling in qualifying. He made a mistake in qualifying, wasn't fast. And then in the race, he ends up running out of fuel. And
they miscalculated that one. That was a bad move or whatever they were trying to do. But they weren't going to win anyway.
Yeah, they didn't have race winning speed. Now they would have maybe finished in the top. They were running in the top 10 at the time. And so that really put a pin in any chance he had of getting in on points in the playoffs. That was done at that point. Like it was it. It was like at that point it was win or bust because there was still an avenue where he could have maybe got in on points.
Yep. So then we returned to Daytona. Kurt Busch has his official retirement press conference there. And it was time to decide who's going to make the playoffs. Daytona regular season cutoff race, number 3 race of the whole year, 91.1%. Another Buescher win, by the way, to give four wins in 5 races on 4 different types of racetracks. Maybe that should have been our hint that they could be strong in the playoffs, or at least one of them would be. So yeah, I mean, this was I think notable for Bubba Wallace making the playoffs for the first time. Michael Jordan on pit road afterwards, celebrating with them. And it was just a great race. I'm so sad that this won't be in the cutoff spot next year.
Can't
really unfortunate, really unfortunate there. But this obviously, I think I don't know, most remembered, but that the Priest crash that took your breath away. That was one of the worst crashes I've ever seen ever. And of course he has to go to the hospital, but he climbs out of the car.
Yeah, that was the thing. Yeah.
And that was just like, oh my gosh, he's walking out of the car.
Yeah.
That was insane. That wreck, holy crap.
I remember you and I don't think we said anything. We just kind of looked at each other and it was like this knowing look of like, oh, this is bad. Like I know what I was thinking, and I'm pretty sure you were thinking the same thing. We're like, oh, we need to go into that mode now, right? Like this is it. I mean, I'm not gonna say it. Like it reminded me of the Newman crash. Like it was the same thing of like in that situation, we both looked at each other like, and was just like, boom, we're in that mode now. And it was like, it felt for a minute there, it felt like, okay, what is going on here? This just went to a whole different level.
Yeah. And look, I started covering NASCAR in 2004. So I've never covered, knock on wood, I've never covered a death in NASCAR. And, all the writers older than me, even by a few years, were all at the 2001 500, or were around in 2000 when multiple fatalities happened. And, it's sort of a reminder when you see this stuff, like, yes, he got out of that car, but it's so important that safety keeps improving, because it's just not someday it's racing and look, it's just going to happen again. You can't be naive enough to say it's never going to happen again.
Yeah. You can, no matter what safety precautions you take. And I think NASCAR does a good job. This is a very dangerous sport. And I think people lose sight of that sometimes, because it has been 23 years now since someone's been killed in one of these races. And it's their safety record's amazing, but as great as the safety record is though, too, like sometimes your luck is going to run out at some point.
Yeah, it's pretty scary to think about.
And it felt like much like the Newman crash, watching this crash, as bad as it was, there was a minute there or you just didn't know. And to see him get out of that race car was like, wow, wow.
So Priest doesn't miss a race, comes back the next week. Bob, of course, asked him about his eyes, and he takes off his sunglasses and his eyes are all freaking swollen. And that was crazy. Big viral moment. I think that was like I think that might be the most seen TikTok video ever on NASCAR's social channels, something like that. They had a crazy, that went crazy viral on TikTok for them. That moment of the sunglasses. So you get to Darlington, playoffs start, and it opens with a Larson win. This was the number 11 race of the year, 83.8%. What else do you remember about this race? You were there.
It felt weird starting a playoff without Chase Elliott. And that Chase wasn't, it kind of was in afterthought mode, which is very unusual. Playoffs were starting and it felt like, was this going to be a continuation of Martin Truex Jr. and Denny Hamlin and dominant regular season? And one of the big takeaway, though, was the Kevin Harvick thing. Kevin has not won a race to this point. It looked like the fastest race car at the end of the race there, and was certainly going to be in position to win this race. Whether he would have or not, who knows, but he certainly was going to be in a really good spot. And then it went all awry because of circumstances.
Well, he was trying to pit.
Yeah.
Rodney Childers called him in to try to jump Tyler Reddick. I think they were slightly ahead of Tyler Reddick, right?
Yeah.
Reddick was leading, maybe.
Reddick was behind him, and he was ahead of behind Larson,
Reddick,
or what?
No, I think Reddick was leading the race.
Yeah, that's right.
Then Harvick pits.
Yeah.
And Reddick is trying to, I think, react by coming to pit road, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I'm wrong. And whatever happened, so Reddick ends up making the mistake there. And Harvick is unable to, you look back, they say, well, why did you still pit? They end up, if they had gone down pit road and just driven through, but they pitted on a closed pit road.
Yeah.
That really hurt them. Their strategy was probably
at that point, their
track position was gone anyway.
They were already sunk at that point.
And that was sort of like, that was a great chance for them to win. Also, I think this is the race. I think Denny was dominating this race and he had a loose wheel.
Yep.
I think he led 177 laps in this race. And he had a loose wheel to take him out. So,
and
Larson ends up winning instead. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's just afterwards, and what this meant for that 4 team is they knew they let one get away. And Kevin, after the race, was upset, frustrated, and he knew like they had their shot to win. Hadn't won all year. Last season, this would have been it. And Rodney was very upset. Like, just said, like, I don't care about making the championship 4 because that's a crapshoot and everything else. I want to win a race in my driver's final year, and this was our opportunity, and we don't know if we're going to get that again. And in the big picture, it will also, that win, by the way, would have kept Harvick in the playoffs because it would have automatically advanced him, and that is something to keep in mind as we move forward as well.
Man, that would have been a great moment.
It would have been huge.
So yeah, that was the number 11 race of the year. Then it's off to Kansas 2, which was another pretty good intermediate track race. Reddick wins this one. He beats Denny Hamlin, his boss. This was the number 6 race of the year, 86.4%. I was there, but I don't really remember that much about this race or anything of what happened. Although I remember Jones ran pretty well. And it was like, man, the legacy cars are starting to come on strong pretty good, but I don't really remember. I just remember Reddick and Hamlin racing for the win. Is that
came down to Hamlin was going to win this race, had a multi-second lead in hand, and then there was a caution that came out very late for the 17 car that re-racked the field. Tyler Reddick got the best of on the restart and he only led 2 laps all day and ends up winning that race and putting himself into the next round.
There you go. Yeah, it was overtime, huh? Yeah,
yep.
Overtime ended. Okay, interesting. Yeah, it's weird. It's weird how some of these races are just, couldn't tell you. And I was there, and it wasn't even that long ago. It was like 9 weeks ago. So then you go to the Bristol night race. Starts off with the Xfinity Series race where Dale Jr. is really, really running well. Looks like he might win.
Oh,
Then he has to pull in with his car catching on fire. His fire suit gets burned.
Yes, leg.
And of course, Denny ends up winning this race. Is the round one cutoff race, and one of the moments of the season where he says, you know, they're booing him, and he says, "I beat your favorite driver." And Marty Snyder says, "Which one?" And Denny says, "All of them." People did not like that, but this is the moment where Bubba is not only made the next round of the playoffs, but he's advanced. He not only made the playoffs, but advanced to the next round in his first trip. He's exhausted afterwards, slumps down by his car. This was, you know, I think more people were hoping for fireworks. I don't know.
Yeah, it wasn't the Bristol race that people were expecting. I mean, it was
the number 27 race of the year. It got 61.6%.
Well, it wasn't the slam bam, you know, classic short track race that we typically see. This was kind of a runaway. The last 100 and some laps were run caution free. The last 131 laps were run caution free, which is not, you know, Denny came on this podcast afterwards and talked about that. And just this was a very different Bristol race.
Yeah, I mean, that's when you have a long green flag run like that to end a Bristol race. And it's the only pavement Bristol race of the year, concrete Bristol race of the year. You're like, ah. It was only a 2-hour, 48-minute race, and just you're like, all right, something happened, but
nothing did.
So then it goes to round two of the playoffs. Big moment here because now it's starting to get down to crunch time a little bit. And this is a William Byron win, although it was Bubba who really, I think he led the most laps in this race. Bubba, and then this was the race where Larson was racing really hard, and the car just snapped around on him arrow wise, and he ends up crashing out. And you're like, he ends up finishing 31st. You're like, this could be bad for Larson here after he had led almost 100 laps that race, and just snapped around on them. Well, while he was racing Bubba, right? And it was no fault of Bubba's.
No, it was a restart, and they're racing hard, and Larson got in it was underneath him and drove in probably a little too hard, and then the arrow and everything kind of took that car around. And Larson said later that with these cars, it just almost like snaps sometimes. And that's what happened in this case, and sent him in the wall. And at that moment, you're like, whoa, okay, you just went from being comfortably in a good spot to now you're going into Talladega and the Roval after that. And you're in a bad, you know, who knows what's going to happen there.
Yeah, I mean, this put Larson right on the cutoff. He was only +2 leaving this race. And it was like, oh, geez, like this, you know, especially with his record at Talladega and stuff, not good. So this was actually not a bad race by Texas standards, though. It was number 28 of the year, and got a 59.5%.
Pop the champagne bottles.
And that was Hendrick's big 200th, right?
Yeah.
That was Hendrick's big win.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So then it goes to Talladega. You were at this one. And this was the big Blaney win that he credits to turning around his momentum for the whole playoffs. Yeah.
And it started a run, a stretch over the last part of the year where he was, you know, any worthiness of questioning his, you know, whether he's a worthy champion or not. I look at this stretch starting at Talladega and you're like, listen, this guy just won 3 of the last 6 races of the year. And this is one of those races where you look at Talladega, you know, and I say this all the time, I don't think drivers get enough credit for being good in these races. And there's a reason why a lot of these guys win the same guys win these races. And Blaney's a perfect example of that, of how he managed that race, because it came down to he and Harvick at the end there, and Byron was in the mix. And the move that Blaney made on the backstretch to go from the high line down low, basically threading the needle to make the pass, and then had the presence of mind not to carry himself too far forward in front of Harvick, who is now on his outside, because if he had, he would have then opened up the outside line for Byron to make a move on him. Instead, Blaney had the presence of mind to kind of throttle back a little bit and kind of manage it, and basically boxed in Byron. Brilliant move. brilliant move, locks Blaney in the next round. And if you're talking about how a driver wins a championship in all the little moments, this is certainly one of those.
Yeah, that was huge. I mean, he was fourth in points, even though he was locked in after this race, but you don't know what's going to happen there. I think he ultimately would have made it anyway without the win. But so this sets up a moment going into the Roval now, where Keselowski was on the cut line +2, but Reddick was -2, and we all just felt like
this is Reddick.
Reddick's gonna pass Keselowski in this moment, unless somebody falls out or something happens, because you had the other ones below the cut line were Wallace, Chastain, Busch, and it was like, well, I mean, are they going to be able to, you just didn't get the sense that something was going to happen there to carry them forward necessarily. And indeed, the Roval, you go and I should say, first of all, that Talladega race was number 7 race of the year at 86.2%. And then the Roval, again, it's just sort of afterwards you go, why isn't this on the oval? Allmendinger won, nice win for him, the one shining moment of college season. But Reddick finishes 6th, and Keselowski 18th, and Reddick just sort of easily moves on.
He played the stage point game, picked up a bunch of stage points, and it wasn't even close. There was no drop.
Nothing really ever happened, right? In this race, like playoff wise, that was just right. I'm not forgetting something.
No, I mean, Kyle Busch was in contention for the win late. If Kyle would have won, he would have locked him into the next round.
That's right.
But
he finished third.
And there was a moment there because there was a late restart. I think there's 2 late restarts where it was like, man, what is Kyle going to do here? Like, to what degree is Kyle going to force the issue and to get that win that he needs? And Allmendinger, it never became a thing because Allmendinger got the better restart and quickly, pulled away.
Well, and then Hamlin had crashed in this race, but he still had enough to make it anyway.
Yeah.
He finished last actually in this race.
Yeah, he had already clinched at that point.
Right. So then we're down to our final 8. You go to Vegas where the eclipse happens during practice, which was kind of fun. It wasn't a big deal, but it was kind of fun. And everybody was talking about, hey, look at the last couple years here, whoever wins this first race in the round of 8, that's the path to the championship.
Yep.
So we never really went back and looked. I mean, this was we thought it was going to be Christopher Bell thought it was going to be his moment. It ends up being Kyle Larson. Bell thinks he missed out on his chance to make the Final 4. But this was not the path to the championship for Kyle Larson, because even though he did make it and did have 2 weeks to work on it. By the way, the next week at Homestead, they say, well, we didn't spend any time on Phoenix.
Yeah.
Look, I don't know if it would have made a difference, but probably could have used a little bit more.
And you tell Cliff Daniels that. I'll let you,
Well, it didn't work out for Hendrick. Hendrick just didn't have it at Phoenix or at the short tracks toward the end of the season. But
no, I mean, the speed that they had for a lot of the year was starting to kind of erode a little bit. Like, they were still good, but it wasn't to that elite level that we're used to seeing. And I think a quick note here, as I'm looking at it, I didn't realize in the moment, the top 4 playoff drivers at Las Vegas: Larson, Bell, Blaney, Byron.
Huh. Yeah. So maybe that is a precursor, huh?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. So, just interesting.
Yeah, Blaney finished 6th in this race, Byron 7th. And actually at this race, we were like, Byron's a little bit off what we thought he would be. And there was some concern about that. And
it felt like a missed opportunity for really Reddick, especially Hamlin a little bit, because, they finished, 10th there, but you expected better. And
well,
he
was
running
Hamlin. That was really Hamlin's chance in the end.
Yeah.
You look at it. I mean, you could talk about Martinsville and stuff, but
they lost 5 points here, and that was they were running 5th or so, and they got shuffled back late. Those points that they lost here, and then the mechanical failure were it. And then I really felt like this was opportunity for Reddick at Las Vegas, at Homestead, to get that win. and it didn't happen. And then at that point, you're like, okay, now you're in trouble.
And this ties for Truex's. Truex finished 9th in this one, which was his first top 10 of the
Yeah.
playoffs at this point. So this race, I'm not sure. Did I say the Charlotte Roval was number 29 and got 58.8%? This race, the Las Vegas number 2, it was okay by intermediate standards. It was
Great finish, though.
18 of the year and got 73%. So, but
Great
yeah,
finish.
again, Bell thinks, you know what? He says on pit road afterwards, I wish I could tell you I felt good about Homestead, but I hate this track, going this track. I've never been good there, and I've struggled there. And, he felt like he was kind of doomed. However, we go there the next week. You and I both got to go, and we're standing on pit road with Bell afterwards talking about Mr. October, Mr. Clutch. He's done it again. He's won. He's raced his way into the Final Four. And that was a pretty good little race because it looked like Blaney should have won that race. And
he had long run speed.
Yeah, he got passed late by Bell. And this was the race, of course, that you mentioned, defining moment for Denny Hamlin, because he looked like he was going to be just fine. And he has this power steering failure suddenly out of nowhere, crashes, and that is his playoffs. Truex, was struggling anyway, and then had an engine blow up for the first time in a few years. So he's screwed at that point. Buescher just, I don't know. He finished 21st, and it wasn't going to be in contention. So that was a big moment. It was it just sort of set the stage for Martinsville. But the Martinsville, go after this race, it was Byron was the points leader, and you thought he was more than good. Turned out he barely hung on it the next week.
He needed all those points.
Bell was in, Larson was in, and then Blaney was the one that was plus 10 on Reddick. But even in the moment, we didn't feel like Reddick was going to be able to make up 10 points on Blaney at Martinsville.
Blaney is so good at Martinsville. This is one of his best tracks. He had the best average finish of any driver, of any active driver. Though he never won a race there, he still had the best average finish. And you kind of assumed he was going to be in the contention for stage points and winning the race. The question going in the race was not whether Reddick could jump him or not. It was whether somebody below him could jump him, whether a Truex or a Hamlin, who are both really, really good at Martinsville, have multiple wins here. Could they come in a essential must-win situation, and then that changed the narrative and changed the scope of the playoff?
And what was interesting, to your point, is like we were never looking at, okay, can Hamlin catch Byron?
Yeah, never.
Hamlin and Truex were minus 37 to Byron. So the conversation was never, they were only minus 17 to Blaney. So it was like, can they outrun Blaney? We're like, Blaney's pretty good, right? Denny or Martin might have to win unless they can get stage points. But it was never like, can Byron have a disastrous day and fall far enough back that he could possibly get past in points? That was never like even a consideration.
No, I mean, I wrote it like he's got 30, I think it was 31 points, right? And like, that's a hell of a margin to have. Like, that's a heck of a safety net. And you're like,
he had 30 points to Reddick and 37 to Hamlin and Truex. So, I mean,
and you're like, that's a great margin to have, and you're fine. And then as things played out, you're like, whew, okay, yeah, you're going to need all of those points and then some, maybe.
So you go to Martinsville and you're like, all right, what's gonna happen here? Last year we had the Hail Melon, that's now outlawed. We got to see the Hail Melon car back at the track, and Ross was sort of reliving that, all that stuff a year later. This race was a couple weeks ago, so nobody needs to be reminded too much. But of course, Blaney wins in definitely a precursor moment. Like, hey, this guy, he's good on short track, right? And he just won on a short track. Now they're going to another short track the next week to decide the championship.
Yeah, where he's finished second the last 2 races.
And that was why I made him my championship pick right after Martinsville.
That was smart.
But of course, I mean, I can't really take credit for. I mean, I didn't even have him. I didn't even have him in the Final Four before that. So
just stop. You picked him to win the championship, Jeff. That's all you need to say. The rest is semantics.
Yeah, the week before I picked him.
Just shush. Just stop. Just say you picked to win the championship. It doesn't. The other stuff, it doesn't matter.
That race ends up getting a 79.1, which obviously surprised me and doomed my was it a good race poll pick.
Yeah, that's right. Did I win the poll after Martinsville?
I think you already
Did
know
you
the answer
mock
to that.
and ridicule me and feel so
I was
arrogantly
so
confident?
happy. I was so happy that you went that high because I thought, no way. No way is a 79% race. No way. But ultimately, looking back, I think people were way happier than I expected or anticipated about Denny missing it, Truex missing
Blaney
it,
winning.
Blaney making it, Byron holding on. I
Yeah,
don't think
there
the
was
race
drama.
was that good.
No, NBC did a great job. I don't know if we talked about this in the podcast, but NBC did a fantastic. As I rewatched the race twice, um, NBC did a fantastic job of selling the drama and focusing on the battles going on and not necessarily, hey, there's not a lot going on with the lead or whatever. It was like you watch that race and you're like, whoa, this is what's going to happen next. They did a really masterful job.
Well, good kudos then for selling it because in reality, the point situation was Denny couldn't get any more points. And Byron, if let's see, was going to suddenly fall back.
But they sold that though. Like that was the thing of like, can Byron hang on here? You know, Byron first has to climb back into position. Like that was the thing because he's climbing. He fell out. Now he's got to climb and claw his way back. He did that, but can he hang on here? That was the thing, and they did. They sold the hell out of it.
Yeah. Well, ultimately, we find out afterwards that Byron was almost passing out in the car in the final lap. So I guess he could have fallen back if we had known that, but he was starting to black out because the helmet blower was blowing hot air. So then it goes to the championship 4, and we're like, what's going to happen at Phoenix? Is it going to be decent this time? It was fine. We just talked about it last week, but Bell obviously breaks a rotor early, first mechanical failure in the elimination area for the Final Four. So he's out, and it comes down to Blaney, Larson, Byron. Larson gets the pit stop that he needed, but those Hendrick cars, even though they qualified really well, Byron won the pole, dominated early. Once they got back in traffic, that was it, and they just didn't have that same kind of speed. Chastain ends up winning. Obviously, Blaney was trying to pass him, and that was it. You had your first time for the a championship 4 driver to not win the race. But Blaney gets it done, wins the championship. And it was really never, toward the end there, it wasn't really a question of what was going to happen.
No, I do remember though. I go back to the first stage and Blaney didn't qualify well and he's not happy with his race car at all. And he's very upset. And then it was like, he didn't feel like he was gaining anywhere, but he finished for stage 1. I think he finished like 9th or 10th spot, right? And it was like, well, like 10th. And he was like, you know what? Like, as miserable as he is with his race car and as frustrated as he is, and it doesn't sound like he's doing anything, he just picked up like 4 or 5 spots. He did a good job of kind of, and so it was like he's
Bell, because he and Bell were both kind of going through together, and Bell finished 9th in that stage, and Blaney finished 10th.
And it was like, okay, they actually were better than they were actually better than he thought. And then going back, fast forwarding to that last pit stop sequence, Larson gets out, and it just felt like 2001 all over again. 2021 all over again. And it's like they got him the pit stop. Larson's got short run speed here. Blaney's car isn't great on short runs. He's much better over the long runs. Like this, it just felt like it twisted. It's flipped there, and it was like, all right, this is Larson's championship. And Blaney got it done. Like great driving by him, and he had to work for it.
So this race gets a number 22 of the year, 67.9, and then was a good race poll. Another win for you, by the way.
Thank you. I just want to make sure we noted that.
Yep.
So
it wasn't even close in the end.
Yeah, you come to playoffs, you just like fell apart.
I Truexed the playoffs, especially the second half of the playoffs. I had an early lead in the playoffs.
Yeah, that's cute. That's cute. Yeah, you peaked too soon there.
Yeah, I definitely did. You came on like Blaney at the end.
That's
although you won the regular season also, so it's not really
a
comparison. But since then, there's been a lot of talk about the playoff format, and we talked about it on the podcast last week. But I think even more this week when you listen to the other podcasts. And you see some of the other stuff come out. I can't remember who it was. Was it who tweeted this week a list of all the seeds over the years?
Dustin Albino.
Dustin Albino might have done that. Yeah. And I don't think anybody lower than like a 7 or something. I should go back to this as we're talking.
I think it was 5. Was it 5?
Was 5 the lowest?
Was
seed
Chase
to win a playoff
Chase was a 5 seed when he won it in 2020.
Okay. So Blaney was a 12 seed. Oh, here it is. Yeah. Logano was a 6 seed in 2018 when it was the big 3 and me. But otherwise it had been a number 1 seed one, a number 1, a number 1, a number 2, and then you had Elliott at 5. But that wasn't like a huge shock. But Blaney being a number 12 seed, I mean, that it just sort of changes. And you heard it on Denny's podcast this week about, you got to be good. It's not even you got to be good in the playoffs. It's got to be good. You got to be good in the end of the playoffs. That's really what it's changed to now. And people are still trying to process that dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, but again, I always fall back on it. Everybody's what's the?
You just put hearts on my face.
I did not put hearts on your face.
What's happening?
I didn't do it. I have no idea. Just trust me. There is no scenario ever in this world where I would ever put hearts on your face.
All right. Well, the people watching the YouTube version of this are going to be in for. All right. Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Now I'm thrown off by the fact that I put heart. There's no heart. The heart did not come from me.
We're almost at 2 hours. My voice is gone.
Yeah. Again, I go back to this format. It's the same for everybody. And so you can pick it apart all you want to, but you have to be great and you have to be mistake free. And you can look at the end and you can look at the numbers or anything like that. But the last 6 races of the season, Blaney went 1st, 12th, 6th, 2nd, 1st, 2nd. Like that's
no, he deserved it with the format. I'm just saying he was a complete non-factor through the entire summer.
Yeah, but Logano wasn't. You could say the same about Logano last year. I just what do you want out of your? But
Logano was the number 2 seed last year, though, going to the playoffs.
Yeah, but he wasn't.
No, I get it.
The seeding can be a little. The seeding can be a little misleading.
It's in order of playoff points. So he won enough stages.
He had wins and stuff. Yeah, but he wasn't somebody you looked at as a legitimate contender going to the playoffs.
He was the number 2 seed.
I understand that, but listen. He'll even tell you this: they didn't have the speed. They didn't think they were going to be.
Yeah, I'm aware.
I mean, I understand. Again, the seeding can be a little misleading. Like Kyle Busch was a high seed going into this year's playoffs. Did anybody think Kyle Busch was going to be? No. Like the seeding can be a little misleading sometimes, depending on because if you get your wins early and you get playoff points.
You had Blaney out in the first round, right?
Yeah, I'm not saying I didn't. I mean, I'm not arguing that.
So, but you're saying, hey, like I have no problem with it's nothing against Blaney. It's insert driver here who was a non-factor for much of the season, won 1 race in the regular season, disappeared all summer, got hot at the end of the playoffs, and wins a championship. Like that, it doesn't matter. Like take away who it is. Is that okay?
This here's a question for you. And I don't fundamentally disagree. I get it. You go back to the elimination era format, right? Remember Jimmy Johnson when he won those championships? What did they do? They freaking they were notorious for basically using the summer months to fine tune and use it as a test session.
Okay.
So how is that? Yeah, I mean they were great for the beginning of the year and they got their wins and they asserted themselves and you knew they were going to be a factor in the playoffs. But then come June, July, and August, it was a thing of we're going to use this. We're going to kind of do some things. How is that all that different? So you've got a team taking off and again, using, essentially, kind of changing their mindset for the middle part of the year where they didn't care about winning or results because they were using it as a test session. And now it's a different form, but it's not that different though.
I don't know. I guess I'm just still trying to wrap my head around it even a week later. It's just
I mean, if you're okay with Johnson, basically saying, hey,
I don't think you can compare Jimmy Johnson to Ryan Blaney's team where Jimmy Johnson is, has the speed early. They're dominating early. They know they have it because remember it wasn't winning in back then, so you had enough points. They'd have
They
enough
were
points.
yeah. Well, they would get multiple wins, and if you got multiple
that
wins,
was
you
the
were going to get a
wild
wild
card
card. Yeah, you were going to be in a wild card spot. So once they got their 2 or 3 wins, and they knew they were in, they would. And like, I don't know. Like the only way you're going to have the system that rewards year long, you're going to have to go back to the old format, because any format you use, you're going to have variations of this.
But arguably, again, we saw the TV ratings now. This came out this week. It was the lowest for a championship race yet in the entire playoff era. It's probably the lowest for a season finale since the 90s or something. Viewers were down another 9% for Phoenix compared to even last year, which was already low. So if the whole point of this is to keep it entertaining and keep fans interested during the playoffs, shouldn't you be getting more numbers to show that? Like, would it really have been worse if it was a final 10 races or whatever? Because what's happening now is you're getting champions that a lot of the fans feel like, hey, this didn't really reflect what I watched. So I'm not giving enough credibility to this format, and that's watering it down. So it gives people less incentive to be as invested in it late in the year, I would say. It would seem like that way.
I get that argument. I don't disagree, but are people then conversely, if this championship is pretty much decided going into the final race of the year, are the numbers really going to not be? I mean, there's a real chance if the championship is decided going into Phoenix, the numbers would have been even lower than they were. We don't know that. I mean, so like if you're going to make that argument, fine. And again, I get that. I think there's a lot of factors that go into the television numbers. One, we talked about it. We literally just ran through the season. How much buzz and excitement was there in the playoffs this year? Like how many moments were you like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. Or we're going to be talking about that for years to come. There was no Hail Mary. No offense to the driver, like great guys, and Blaney's, but none of them are outsized personalities that are like gonna, like, oh my God, that guy is gonna move the needle now in this amazing way. And say what you will about Chase Elliott, the Chase Elliott factor is real. We saw it this year a little bit when he was out some races and then came back. He wasn't even in the play. I mean, he was barely mentioned in the playoffs. Like he didn't even win a race. Like that's real. I mean, and frankly, let's be honest too. Phoenix isn't the most exciting track. We've talked about that. Like there are a lot of factors. And I agree with everything you say. Like I get it. And you're not wrong. But there are so many factors that go into this. Like you just to pinpoint it on the playoff format, I don't think you can do that. Is it part of it? Absolutely. Is it a conversation worth having? Sure. But you also need to look at your venues. You need to look at the quality of racing. You need to look at the drivers involved. How many drivers currently in this sport move the needle where you're like, that guy wins races, wins a championship? It's like, boom, it's going to be a big thing. That the reality is you don't even have that. Even Elliott, to some degree, when he won the championship, the ratings didn't skyrocket all of a sudden. The sport more than anything right now, the problem is you do not have an outsized personality, a crossover star. You do not have somebody right now in this sport who my mom or your mom or somebody who follows the sport on a very, very casual basis goes, oh, do you know who Ryan Blaney is? How many people are really going to know who that is? The answer is not very many. But Jeff Gordon, I know who Jeff Gordon is. I've seen him on commercials. I've seen him in commercials with Shaq or Dale Earnhardt Jr. or this or that. Like you just don't have that right now. You don't even have like a Carl Edwards who, while he didn't win a championship, was filling in on daytime talk shows. Like you just don't have that personality that frankly moves the needle. That more than anything right now, more than a playoff format, more than the racing on the racetrack, I think is why this sport is where it's at right now.
That was a good
Why
rant.
are you smiling?
You ranted.
I don't know.
This is like Jordan's first good rant of the year.
No, I've had a few of them.
That was a rant.
Not nearly as many as you. I don't think it was a rant.
That was your longest rant of the year for sure. That was a great rant. Good rant.
Thank you.
I will say though, to say that my mom listens to all of our podcasts. So
okay, that's fair.
I'm not going to like that you think that she doesn't know who Ryan Blaney is.
Okay, and that's fair. I'm sorry, Mrs. Glock. I apologize, but my mom sure doesn't.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, but like you just don't have that though. Like,
well, listen, I think you had a great rant, great points, and I will just let this podcast end on that note.
It was fun. Can't believe we just went through all 38 races.
Gosh, in just a little over 2 hours, Jordan. Jeez,
Yeah,
that
you
was
got
the
me up at
longest.
7 a.m. on a Saturday to do this.
I woke up at 5 a.m. Mountain Time to do this.
Yeah, well, you have kids, and again, this is why you don't have children, is because we had to work around your schedule and your
You
kids'
did.
schedule.
Listen, I will say I gave Jordan 2 options for this. My wife is working 3 straight night shifts this week.
Yeah.
Or she's 12-hour shifts this weekend. So we either had to do it at 5 a.m. Mountain Time or
Yeah.
at like 8:30
Let,
Mountain Time,
let
which
me
is
run through it
10:30.
let me run it through from my perspective of the
Okay.
options you gave me. Okay.
Okay.
One was, hey, we could do it at like 10:30 on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. Hell no. Because I know what I was doing last night at 10:30 at night, and I was not in a condition to do this podcast. And that's going to be the case probably tonight and maybe Sunday as well. And so, and then the other thing was, we could do like 4:30 on Sunday. I'm like, that's like in the middle of Sunday fun day. I'm gonna be knee deep in mimosas probably. Well, the mimosas are in the morning, so who knows what's gonna be in the afternoon. 4:30 on a Sunday does not fly. And then you're like, how about 7 a.m.? I guess that's like literally the lesser of two evils. Like I get up early anyway. I was up at 6 a.m. today. So I'm like, I'll just do 7. That's fine. And, thank God for a couple cups of coffee and we'll be good to go. So here we are.
I don't even feel well, and I woke up at 4:30. I set my
I feel
alarm at
great.
4:30 to do
Yeah.
this. So I mean,
I slept
look,
for like
look
4
at the
hours
bags
and
under
5
my
hours.
eyes. My gosh.
Oh no, I barely slept. I had
Well,
a heck of a
I
fun night.
appreciate you. I had to do it, so I did it myself. I appreciate you waking up. And of course, we appreciate you all for listening. I don't know if you thought this was a good episode or not. Let us know if we should try this again next year or not, if you enjoyed the season review, the trip down memory lane. Next week, we will be back, of course, for another teardown, but we will be back again together.
Yay!
We will be in Las Vegas, where
Vegas,
we
baby.
have just done 6 days of being there for F1. The F1 race is coming up this week. We're both flying there on Tuesday, and we're going to be covering it extensively with our colleagues, Madeline Coleman and Luke Smith, our F1 writers, as well as Tashawn Reed, our Las Vegas writer. We have all hands on deck for this. This is like the motorsports Super Bowl of this country, essentially, even though you have Indy 500 and Daytona 500, certainly that's not what the attention around the world is going to be on cars going down the Las Vegas trip, starting at 1 a.m. Eastern time on Saturday night or early
5
Sunday
hours for me,
morning.
man. I'll be fine. You'll be sleeping. You'll be like, I'm ready to go to bed. I'll be like, I'm just getting going.
It's going to be fascinating to see how it screws up our sleep schedule, how it is to get around the city. We're going to come back to you with all that kind of stuff next week on the Teardown, and we'll talk whatever things have happened in NASCAR too, if there has been any news. But so check us out there next week, and we'll have a couple more NASCAR season recaps following that too. So we're not done yet, but we thank you as always for listening, and we will talk to you next time on the Teardown. See you, everybody.